All drugs cause adverse reactions, but it's a gamble we all take. A pill for every ill? 27 drugs have been taken off the market for killing people, including Vanessa Young, whose father avenged her death with a new Canadian law on drug safety. We'll hear from that dad, MP Terence Young, and a leading authority in pharmacology about the hidden dangers of the medicines so many take for granted. This is Context, a look at life beyond the headlines.
Well, as much as I'd like to start on a cheery note today, we have some serious business on this episode. Today, we're talking about what can be done when the risk of prescription drugs taken as prescribed can be deadly. Our first guest is the author of Death by Prescription, a book which documents his own daughter Vanessa's death, a tragedy that set the wheels in motion on a new law for Canadian drug safety. Please welcome Member of Parliament Terence Young to Context. Hello, Mr. Young.
Hello, Lorna.
Well, let's start with Vanessa's sad story. 4 doctors, always apparent at medical visits for your 15-year-old daughter, Vanessa. What went horribly wrong in her treatment?
Vanessa was 2 weeks short of 16 years old. She was a very healthy, beautiful girl. She was described by one of the doctors who saw her 4 days before she died as the picture of perfect health with peaches and cream skin complexion. But she had a problem throwing up after meals for a little bit over a year. And so her doctor had given her a prescription drug called Propulsit, and the generic name is Cisapride. And he said that would help the food move through her system. And she seemed to think that that drug was helping her, and she had used it on or off for the previous year. But we came home that Saturday, and she came to talk to me, and I said, "Not now, Vanessa, I want to," because I knew she wanted to negotiate her evening out. So this is a 15-year-old girl negotiating her Saturday evening out. And I said, "Not now, if you just, let's talk about it later." And she jumped up to go upstairs, and it was like a giant hand pushed her body down to the floor. She just fell to the carpeted floor, dead. Her heart stopped.
Propulside that she was taking was a popular drug for treating heartburn, but it did have a bad safety record. Why didn't somebody in the treatment cycle warn you of that risk?
Well, that was the question. It's been the biggest question of my life, and I've worked for 14 years to find out the answers to that and look for solutions. But what I discovered like the very next day, in fact, I discovered that night, is that Propulsit had a poor safety record. 80 people had officially died related to heart arrhythmias caused by Propulsit. Like, who would think that a stomach medicine could cause heart arrhythmia, which is basically your heart stopping and you die? And so I began to research the next morning, and I discovered that the doctors didn't really read the warnings that the drug companies sent out. In fact, the drug companies sent them out in fine print and in confusing words. There's a term called label clutter. So the drug label, which is a document, 50 to 60 pages in 8-point print, the doctors never really read them because there was too much in them. And in fact, our doctors get their drug safety information from commissioned sales reps who come into their offices and bring catered lunches. They're called detail reps. And research has shown that the detail reps get into the doctor's offices and they tell them all the good things about the drug, but they don't tell them about the safety hazards. So the doctors get a skewed image, a skewed safety picture on drugs.
You settled a lawsuit with Johnson & Johnson over this, but
Yes.
You are convinced this goes far beyond your personal loss. Why?
It's important, Lorna, here, I'm talking about prescription drugs used the right way. Used
As
according
prescribed.
to the prescribing instructions, are the 4th leading cause of death. And in fact, 27 drugs have been taken off the market in Canada since 1997 for injuring and killing patients, and Propulsit was just one of them. And when I began to look at the safety record in the United States, it was the exact same story. The pharmaceutical companies do everything they can to make sure that patients don't hear any of about the serious risks to drugs because it would hurt their marketing of the drugs.
I don't think Canadians realize that Health Canada could not recall unsafe drugs. It could not pull prescription drugs from the market. You've made changes for us now with that, with the new Vanessa's Law in your daughter's memory, Bill C-17. the Protecting Canadians from Unsafe Drugs Act. Tell us where we're going to notice this effect of this new law.
Well, once the bill becomes law, Vanessa's law will empower the Minister of Health to order unsafe drugs off the market if the drug company refuses to do so, to order further research when there's a suspicion that a drug is causing adverse reactions, serious adverse reactions, but they can't quite identify it, to order further research on a drug. The minister will have the power to order the pharmaceutical company to issue clearly worded warnings in plain language, so doctors will understand the risk and patients can understand the risk, and patients can become enabled to participate in their own health care and make informed decisions. This is a very, very powerful bill. It's hard to overstate how important Vanessa's law will be to Canadians.
Okay, Terence, we're going to take a pause here to read a statement from Russell Williams, the president of Canada's research-based pharmaceutical companies. He writes, "Our industry is committed to patient safety above all else, and for this reason, Canada's research-based pharmaceutical companies supports this bill's direction. It formalizes many things that our companies have already implemented. Our industry has a solid track record of developing safe and effective medicines and vaccines that transform the lives of millions of Canadians every day. These millions of Canadians that take medication need to know that the treatment their doctor prescribed for them is safe and effective. We believe there is the potential for greater gains in patient safety by taking a more comprehensive life cycle approach to the overall regulatory system. In addition to the measures proposed in the bill, we would welcome provisions that focus on the problem of counterfeit medicines, give authority for Health Canada to stop sale, and increase efforts to disseminate approved label information to patients." Terence, how would you like to respond to the drug company's defense there?
Well, the pharmaceutical industry always say their drugs are safe and effective when taken as prescribed, and in many, many cases, it simply was never true.
We have a visitor in our audience who went to school with Vanessa. Sheldon, can you introduce her?
Thank you so much, Lorna. I'm actually here with Christina Evanoff, and as you mentioned, she went to school with Vanessa, and she has a comment and question to share.
Sure.
Hi there, Terence. Yeah, I went to school with your daughter, Vanessa. We were in the same grade, and she was just a beautiful light in our school. I will always remember that. And,
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, just a great girl, a sweetheart, and I just think you're so brave for all the work that you've done for her, and I know it's for her and for that passion that you have, and I'm sure for other people too. And my question for you is, what do you say to others who have gone through a situation like you went through, who have lost a loved one because of this tragedy? What is your advice that you give them?
Well, I've got to think about that for a minute because I've done it a number of times. When I found somebody in Oakville, a family who've lost a child, sometimes I take the time to contact them. And the first thing I say is that, you know, it gets better over time. The grief is absolutely overwhelming. It's surreal, in fact. It's like you're in another world. And it does get better in time. And I advise them to get a grief counselor. And if they're not somebody who has a faith, who's lucky to have a faith like I do, I advise them to get grief counseling because everybody grieves differently when they lose someone. There are no rules to grieving.
Okay, Mr. Young, this has also been a spiritual journey for you.
Yes.
So stay with us in the audio studio. We're going to find out about fighting as a way of grieving and what you learned about the grace of God as a result. But first, it's time to involve you at home in the discussion. So here's Sheldon Neal.
Thank you, Lorna. A story is unfolding today about information and what we need to know about the prescription medications we take. So our question for you is this: do you ask your doctor or pharmacist questions about the medications, you're prescribed? Tell us about your experience. We read and we hear every message, so contact us by one of the means you see there on the screen. Can't wait to read them.
Well, in our Lorna's books this week, Terence Young's Death by Prescription. This is a gripping read, and I will never take prescription drugs the same way. Written from a family in loss, it is an expose on the kind of care we should be taking with all of our medications. We're giving away 4 copies this week, and you can call 1-866-315-2080 or enter to win on our email or Facebook and Twitter. Coming up, We'll ask a spokesperson on drug safety how to determine if the medicines we are prescribed are good for us. That's next. Our next guests are Julie Greenhalgh. She is the Director of Projects at the Institute for Safe Medication Practices Canada. She has been a pharmacist for over 30 years, and we're joined by Dr. Jake Thiessen. Dr. Thiessen founded the Pharmacology program at the University of Waterloo, and he chairs Health Canada's Scientific Advisory Committee on Pharmaceutical Sciences and Clinical Pharmacology. Welcome you both to Context. You feel this has been unfair, emotionally loaded, over the bow at the pharmaceutical industry. A story like what Terence brings up in Death by Prescription. Why?
Well, first of all, I'm sympathetic to all these cases that emerge. When a person dies or has really tragic outcomes from a drug, yes, those are sad things. But I think what is unfair is to put this before people without understanding exactly what it is that a pharmaceutical company needs to do to actually come to market with something. Do you think for one moment that what they want to do is create havoc in society? That never is the intent at all.
Well, Julie, there have been 27 drugs pulled off the Canadian market within the last 2 decades because they kill people. So how did such dangerous medications get in the hands of consumers?
I think that what we're trying to learn from is how those drugs did come to market and how we can change things going forward. And I think really that's the intent of Vanessa's law is to bring out more information so that healthcare providers and patients will have that information when they need it, when those drugs are being prescribed, to know what things to look for, because certainly, as Jake said, there's no intent to harm.
Okay. Brian, in our studio audience, has a question for us. Brian, you are in a clinical drug trial. Your mother was on a drug trial. Your question for our guests.
How are these non-critical illnesses drugs getting to the market so easily?
Well, the risk that we are talking about here is something that emerges long after the drug has been approved, typically. You see, in the trials that are being done by the pharmaceutical company, all of those kind of things are very, very carefully orchestrated and controlled by regulatory agencies in Canada, the United States, Europe, Australia, etc. When the evidence is being accumulated, if there was one of these kind of cases or 2 of these kind of cases, that drug would never make it. I personally have been in a trial, and there was an untoward reaction in me, and eventually that drug never made it to market. But what happens is, once the drug gets approved, it gets out there, and as we would sometimes say in the industry, all hell breaks loose is what people commonly say, okay? Which is, people start using it in ways that was never intended to, with all kinds of other things. They're taking alternative medicines. There's just a litany of things that happen, and it is in this litany that suddenly things begin to emerge.
Okay, Julie, deaths related to prescription opioid use doubled in just over 10 years. In Ontario alone, Canada is the 2nd highest per capita consumer of prescription opiates globally. Describe what misuse of those opiates is looking like.
Well, there are different kinds of misuse. There's deliberate misuse and there's unintentional misuse. And so in terms of deliberate misuse is what we tend to think about as people who are dependent on opioids, who have taken medications for some kind of recreational effect to get high, essentially. I think the inadvertent misuse is what we're now becoming more concerned about. And you're right, that we are concerned about the level of opioid use in Canada and in the United States as well. And it's really leading to a change in how we think about prescribing these medications and starting to really recognize that we need to treat them in a more careful way.
Okay, who are the gatekeepers on our medications? Is it doctors, is it pharmacists, or is it me, the patient?
pharmacists certainly have a big role to play in terms of monitoring when they start to see, an increase in usage or change in usage. Then there's an opportunity for pharmacists to intervene with the patients and with the prescribers. And I think as patients, we need to understand that. That we can't always medicate everything, and that we do need to treat medications with the care that they deserve.
Julie, thank you very much for being with us. Dr. Thiessen, we're going to ask you to stay with us for a closing segment with Terence Young. Coming up, Death by Prescription began a spiritual journey for its author, Terence Young, a deal he made with God. Activism as part of grief, or is activism part of how God intends us to be on our safety? Those questions when Terence Young returns with Dr. Thiessen after this. Death by prescription has a spiritual side effect we're looking at now. Death by prescription captures the life story of the Honourable Terence Young's daughter, Vanessa. Member of Parliament Terence Young rejoins us now from Ottawa, along with Dr. Jake Thiessen. Thank you both for coming back to us here at Context. Terence Young, a side effect of any family member's death is heightened spiritual perception. When your daughter died from a prescribed medication, what was your exchange with God like?
When Vanessa was lying unconscious for the entire night from March 18th to March 19th before she died, I talked to God and I pleaded, and it wasn't to be for her to recover. And she died the next day at 1:40 on the Sunday. I began to research the drug that caused Vanessa's death, Propulsa, the next morning. Vanessa's sister went to school just to be with her friends, typed the name of the drug into a website, and in 1 minute found safety warnings that Vanessa should have never been given that drug. It should never be given to anyone who's throwing up because it could cause heart arrhythmia. And so I was so shocked that there were so many secrets and that people didn't know the risks of drugs. I swore an oath. I swore an oath to myself that I would find out exactly how she died and why she died, and I would work to make sure it didn't happen in other families. Now, I've since found out, my wife told me that she came home from a Bible class one day and said, you're not supposed to swear oaths. And I said, well, I didn't know, and I'd already done it. So I began this work, and what I discovered was that I could always sleep well. I had my own business, and my business was doing well, but I could always sleep well. I always had an appetite, and I had energy to work. And I wondered why, because I didn't do anything special to deserve it. But I actually realized, or I felt, that I was in a state of grace, that I was doing the right thing, I was on the right track, and I became incredibly resolved, stubborn, some people would say, to work to make it not happen in other families. So that was the beginning of my journey, and I was never alone on that journey. And I thought back afterwards to, I grew up in St. Anne's Church in the West End of Toronto. And I looked up in the top of the dome there's a relief of Isaiah, and it says, "Here am I, send me." And I realized that, in a sense, I'd looked at it 100 times, that in a sense I had been asked to do that work.
We're going to now go back to Dr. Thiessen. And Dr. Thiessen, thank you for letting me ask you, as a practitioner in science, a spiritual question, because that is what Context wrestles with. What would a God-conscious approach look like in relationship to our prescription medications?
Might I say at the very outset to Mr. Young that my heart goes out to him and his family. I've got 2 daughters. I can understand the absolute grief that this family must have experienced. And, for him to take up this cause and try to make the world a better place, I applaud him for that. Going to your question very specifically, I guess, when I look at creation in the grandest sense, one of the things that strikes us all is that God really created a marvelous world. There were many things that he provided us with. And the interesting thing is he actually gave us a natural medicine cabinet. And the natural medicine cabinet actually contains many things. The point I'm trying to make is this, that the Creator has equipped us with all kinds of things in our world, okay? And he's also equipped us with intelligence to use those things the right way and bring new creativity to the whole thing.
So you think one of the ways we manage risk in our medications is really don't reach so much for pharmacology.
No, I think that medicines have a terrific place. And while on the one hand, there are these things that Mr. Young has described, at the same time, there are innumerable people who are treated wonderfully by them. I mean, who of us has not had a headache and discovered that there are some things that can solve that problem? We're going to talk a little bit probably about sort of the pill for every ill which he has brought up.
Yes, let's talk about that. The pill for every ill. That doesn't sound like a very trusting in God's sovereignty and peace in our lives.
Well, I suppose if you look at that very statement, you know, if you consider where we are in our world and what we tend to do, we are a society that believes quick fixes are right, that we're entitled to them, and that we take every opportunity to use them. So what I'm saying, Lorna, is there are two sides to these things. There is one side, which is the devastating side that Mr. Young talks about, but I'm afraid there are an immense number of people that are benefiting from these medicines.
I do want to comment on that, because it's the marketing practices of the pharmaceutical companies that get people taking too much of a drug too soon before it has an established safety profile. They also hide the risks from doctors, and they hide them from patients to keep sales up. So it's the over-prescribing that is the issue, and it is the corrupt marketing practices that are killing patients.
Okay, let's get Dr. Giesbrecht to respond to that.
The corrupt practices and so on. Those are very strong words.
Yes, they are.
Well, I'm not sure if Mr. Young appreciates what it takes to actually have a drug approved.
Oh, I do.
How many patients are actually treated with a drug, and
I'm well aware of
what the ambitions are of the pharmaceutical industry are.
Because we aren't going to be able to settle this issue in this segment, gentlemen, both of you, but I do want to get back to what makes Context unique in news analysis, and that is we are trying to figure out what's a wise way forward. And I've just both seen how adversarial this issue can be with such different views. Both of you, I want to ask, what inspiration for your difficult travels that you take in this field do you draw from the teachings of Jesus? So, Mr. Young, this campaign you've been on for 14 years, what inspiration did you take from the teachings of Jesus for this?
Well, it's in John 14:2 and 3, and where Christ said, I go to prepare a place for you. And that, for me, is the critical promise of Christianity. It's the critical promise of life, that he will come back for me. And so that was the other part of my oath, that I would do this work. And my deal with God is that I get to see Vanessa again. And that's what has inspired me to a large degree, and it has kept me going.
Wow, Terence Young, this is what the resurrection is for. It always takes a champion to protect people. And thank you for taking your personal pain and your spiritual strength into that journey for the rest of us. And Dr. Thiessen, the teachings of Jesus, how do they inspire your work as a watchdog, as someone with Health Canada's oversight on drug care in Canada?
Okay, thank you. I think in terms of helping people, the mission of Mr. Young and mine are probably the same, but we come at it from a different point of view. To rescue a person using some kind of a strategy is, to me, something that gives hope to people. When you take somebody who is in pain and no longer has the pain, when somebody has arthritic problems and they go away because of the use of medications, that's a life-saving, that's a quality of life-saving thing. Isn't that no different than when Christ applied the dirt and a spittle to a blind man's eye, and eventually that person saw? This is our human way of dealing with some of these things. And I think the passion to make a difference in our world remains the same.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thiessen. And I want to say to our viewers at home that if you take a look at Terence Young's book, he is clear all the way through. Do not stop taking your medication until you have visited with your doctor. So, Terence Young, we are putting death by prescription and the word of caution it holds in our Lorna's free book draw this week. That's for you at home. We've got 4 copies to give away, and you can call us at 1-866-315-2080 or email us or Facebook us to have your name selected. And we'll be right back with my final thoughts on the problem of belief on our health future. What if our belief in defenses against death becomes our demise? Those thoughts next. I believe God is in relationship with us through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. We call that good news. It's historically been called good news. It's salvation that results in God's purpose and care of our lives here and in heaven. But people often don't believe that. It takes an experience for that to become real in your life. So imagine my surprise in researching prescription safety. I came across people don't believe it. To quote from Death by Prescription, the truth that their doctor could give them something that could seriously injure or kill them is simply too much for the average patient to believe. Well, I think faith in God or faith in our doctor's prescription can be grounded in facts. There's no shortcuts. We need to do our homework on both spiritual health and physical health. And there's more on how to pursue both sets of facts on our website. We've put some links there, some blogs there. You can drop us an email and we'll get you connected to trustworthy source material for your own investigation. For all of us, I'm Lorna Dueck. Thanks for watching. Join us next week as we explore life beyond the headlines.